So glad you could join us again today. And I'm very excited because today we're going to be talking about the coach. Now I know that you have all done a lot of hard work looking at the different parts here, at the critic, at your vulnerable self, at your ideal self, and we've been wading through that really mucky period. Now what we get to do today is we start to find ways to take us through that muck to the other side, and that's in developing our coach. So people have asked me what exactly is the coach, and I would define the coach mostly as the true self. It's who we really are on the inside, and it's an integration, as you'll see up here, it's an integration of all of our parts together. Now we can have a coach whether you are of Christian faith or not, but when we take in the Christian faith and we think about the power of the Holy Spirit and who we are, our identity in Christ, that is one of the biggest voices that helps to bring about our healthy self, our healthy coach. So let me explain a little bit by looking at each one of the circles. So for example, if we look at our critic, remember that the critic had the role of protector. The critic wants to protect us, but not in the healthiest of ways. So what happens is that when we can think about taking that voice and saying, what is the purpose of the voice? What's the meaning of the voice? Well, the voice and the critic wants to protect us. And if we can take this and instead of having it be critical, we can allow it to help us to form good boundaries, then what can happen is that the critic part becomes the protector of our boundaries. So when we say, you know what, it's not okay for you to hurt me. It's not okay for you to say mean things to me. That's a healthy way in which we're protecting ourselves, like this part would want to, but it's doing it in a way that empowers us. So that's what we're looking at with the protector of boundaries. With the vulnerable self, when we're feeling really scared and vulnerable because the critic is pounding away at us, that is obviously unhealthy. But when we can take that voice and give that voice power through the Holy Spirit to say, you are loved and beautiful, that part of you that's vulnerable and real, people actually want to know that part of you, then that empowers us to become vulnerable in sharing our hearts with each other and sharing our hearts with God. And so that brings out a strong vulnerability rather than the victim piece. And then finally, the ideal self with the power of the Holy Spirit is free to become real, because instead of having to pretend and do things that you feel like people want you to do or that you need to do to be holy enough in God's eyes, you realize that this is the Holy Spirit has already covered you, ladies, and God sees you as pure, white, and unblemished. And so imagine if you can take each part of you, take your critic, clothe her in white, and then she can protect you in a safe way. Clothe your vulnerable self in white and in beauty, and she can be real, that real you who you really are. And then the ideal self doesn't have to put on faces or masks anymore. Now, the way we're going to do this is by looking at the messages that each one of these are giving to ourselves, and then we're going to begin challenging them. And as we challenge them, you will begin to find new words for yourself. So perhaps instead of failure, you'll be able to say, I make mistakes, but I am beloved and I am beautiful regardless of whether or not I fail. Or perhaps you can say, I went from feeling very dirty or unclean to someone who is absolutely pure and washed as white as snow. And those would be the new healthy voices that would become your coach. So the ultimate goal is that when we can take all of the parts and then take those parts, cover them with the power of the Holy Spirit, listen to the Holy Spirit, listen to the verses, while we're also allowing ourselves to feel those emotions, we can then begin to develop new, healthier voices that become our true self or the coach.